Okay, we're going to start. Everybody, we're going to start. Thank you for coming. Outside, you guys want to come in a little bit? Join the party. Thank you all for coming. This is a lot different than Chelsea Handler's crowd. I just want to say that right now. There's a much different looking group, so I'm glad to have some inclusion. We are the Wild Card West Speaker Series. We are dedicated to bringing our community together for stimulating and thought-provoking conversations. We are independent of any sponsorship, corporate and/or political influence. We are inclusive of all and prejudiced towards none. We believe that through dialogue comes insight. So thank you for coming. Okay. Very excited. I'm a little starstruck tonight, to be honest with you. Dana White was born in Manchester, Connecticut on July 28th of 1969, the son of June and Dana White. He and his sister Kelly were raised by their mother and her family for the majority of their childhoods. He is of Irish descent. He began boxing at 17 and graduated from Herman High School in Maine in 1987. Dana is currently, as you all know, a very, very successful American businessman and the current president of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which is the largest mixed martial arts organization in the world. Under Dana's leadership, the UFC has grown into a globally popular multi-billion-dollar enterprise. So he's here to talk, he's here to take questions, and as he told me upstairs, anything is on the fucking table. So feel free to ask him whatever you want. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky to have Mr. Dana White.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.
So, how many boxers do we have here tonight? I'm just curious.
8.
All right. How many UFC fighters do we have? All right, good. Okay.
0.
So we're going to talk about.
They're sick of listening to me.
We're going to talk about boxing. We're going to talk about UFC, and something that we always try to hit on at every speaker series is just kind of, what does it take to kind of get where somebody like Dana is? Somebody who has obviously taken a road less traveled, has done it his own way, has broken pretty much every rule there is to break, and hopefully we'll talk about some of that. I think he's had his fair amount of contact with law enforcement, with Catholic priests and sisters in school where he got in quite a bit of trouble, and he's kind of ended up in an extraordinary position. And I personally find anyone that does that extraordinarily helpful to me as I try and navigate my life, and I hope that that's something that we can all get from Dana. So I think we should just kind of get into it. And I thought we'd start by talking a little bit, before we get into the UFC, about sort of how the UFC started and how you and Lorenzo met for the first time. Because so many great successful business stories, it started with a friendship. Right. And I find that to be remarkable.
So, how many know the history of the UFC? Does anybody know? A few people know it. Thank you. So, I started out in boxing. I never really wanted a real job. I had a job in Boston at a hotel. I was a bellman at the Boston Harbor Hotel. I was 19 years old. And one day I was standing in there waiting for somebody to come down with their bags, and I said, what the fuck am I doing here? I hate this. I don't know why I'm doing this, and this is not where I want to be. I was in love with the sport of boxing, and I literally walked out the front door that day from a job that you make cash every day. They had a 401k plan. They had, we got a paycheck on top of that, great health benefits, and it just wasn't for me. So there was this kid named Peter Welsh who was in South Boston, Massachusetts. He's sort of a legend in that town. He was then, even at that age that he was. involved in street fights and boxing and all this stuff, and I'd heard so many stories about him. I wanted to go learn everything about the fight business. So I literally sought this guy out. I looked all over town for him, and finally one day I ran into him and I said, I know this sounds weird, but I want to train with you. I want to learn everything that you know about fighting. And thank God he said yes. Took me under his wing, and literally I've done everything in the business, from box to referee, spit cups, the corner work. I managed fighters. I've literally done it all. And I ended up leaving Boston and moving back to Las Vegas. So how did I get from... So I graduated high school in Maine, and he likes talking about the education part of this thing, but basically I barely made it through high school by the skin of my teeth. I said, you can't be the guy that didn't graduate high school. And at the time that I was going to school in Las Vegas, they had 21 credits. You had to have 21 credits to graduate. Maine had 18. So I went to Maine to graduate high school. I took 3 classes and got the hell out of there. I never liked school. Believe me, this isn't to tell anybody not to go to college. College is great. College just wasn't for me. School wasn't for me. I always feel like, again, I'm not telling people not to go to college. I think it's school and these different schools. If you ask any kid anywhere in this country that's going to school, what's your major? I'm majoring in this, but I'm probably going to switch to this. They're in school because you're told you have to go to school. If you don't go to school, you're never going to amount to anything. And I think the kids just go to school and they end up with an education that they don't really use because they don't know what they want to do. In my opinion, the key to life is knowing exactly what you want to do. When you can, and it's hard. Not a lot of people know exactly what they want to do. Where I was lucky is I knew exactly what I wanted to do my entire life. And I just focused on it and worked on it every single day until, here we are sitting in this gym right now. But, so I got through high school. I moved back to Boston for a while, hooked up with Peter Welch, did all that stuff. Went back to Vegas, and a buddy of ours named Adam Corrigan was getting married. And I have a blanket policy. I hate weddings. I don't go to anybody's wedding, ever. Okay? So I'm like, this guy used to drive me to school when we were kids. How can I not go to his wedding? I have to go to his wedding. So I go to his wedding, and I bump into a guy I used to go to school with, Lorenzo Fertitta, at this wedding. And Lorenzo says to me, I heard you're boxing, you're training people, you're doing this. Well, I just got on the athletic commission. I want to start training with you. So we set up an appointment for Monday, and Lorenzo and I have been together ever since. And that was in 1996. And you want me to go this far?
Yeah, keep going.
All right.
So I think you should step back and talk a little bit about Sister Cecilia, just real quick, because just to get an idea of what kind of a hellraiser and lunatic this man is, you should.
First of all,
a master of crime.
First of all,
Sister Cecilia.
I got kicked out of Bishop Gorman twice. And the reason he's even talking about this, because it's embarrassing. Lorenzo told him this story yesterday or today or whatever it was, and I hate this story. But so we went to this. Gorman is like the top 10 football team in the country now. They were #1 the last few years, and they have this beautiful new campus. It's like a college. The place is incredible. The Gorman we went to was a shithole. Okay, it was an old building on Maryland Parkway in Las Vegas, and the building was really old. And so it would get so hot as it started to get summer in Vegas, they would have to keep the doors open. And there were these metal doors that weighed about 1,000 pounds. So I was going to the bathroom one day from another class, and I kicked the door shut. Because that's what kids do. I don't know why I did it, but I did it. So I kicked the door shut. This thing flew and slammed shut. And so some kids that were in that class were talking about it. I said, yeah, I'm the one that kicked it shut. Well, it freaked the nun out so bad that she didn't teach class.
Terrified the nun.
Yeah, she was all freaked out because somebody did that. So the kids would tell me every day, kick the door shut. So every day I'd go to the bathroom and I'd kick the door shut. And these kids wouldn't have class because this lady would be so, this lady was like 70 years old, right? So we used to wear it on, and I guess she came back into the class and she goes, I got him. She got my shoe. So I'm walking around with one shoe on, It's a stupid story.
No, it's a good
Lorenzo
story.
always tells it, and likes to, but that's how I got kicked out of Bishop Gorman High School. Stupid story. It's an embarrassing story.
I just like that you were preppy, right? Like that's topsiders with no
That's what
socks.
that was the shit then. I don't know.
I find that, again, as I said earlier, the notion that you met a guy, Lorenzo, you became great friends with him, and you then went on this ride with him. And I think we've all heard stories about the origins of the actual deal. That originally there was $1 million price tag put.
$2 million.
Was it 50 for?
It was $2 million.
Okay, so will you tell that?
So basically, everybody in this room, I don't care what you do for a living or where you've lived or where you come from, everything in life, and you can trace this back in your own lives, everything in life is about timing. Timing is everything in life. It's crazy when I look back on the timeline of Lorenzo and I and the purchase of the UFC and all that stuff. But at the time, I was Frank Fertitta, who's Lorenzo's brother, and I were at the Hard Rock in Las Vegas one weekend partying, and we saw this guy named John Lewis, who at the time was a fighter in the UFC, and he was the first guy ever to teach jiu-jitsu in Las Vegas. He had a jiu-jitsu school. So I said, oh, that's one of those UFC guys. And Frank said, I've always wanted to learn ground fighting. And I said, me too. So we went over and we talked to him, and we set up an appointment on Monday for him to come to our gym and start training us. And from there, he started bringing down guys like Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, BJ Penn, and all these guys started training with us. And we got to know these guys. And we were like, holy shit, these guys are like really smart guys. And there was always this stigma about the UFC that these guys were a bunch of crazy animals. And as you start to meet these guys, you're blown away by how smart they were. And I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I started managing. They asked me, Chuck and Tito both asked me to manage them. So I started managing them, and at the time, the UFC didn't want Chuck Liddell. They wouldn't sign him. They didn't think he was good enough, and whatever the reasons were that they didn't want to sign Chuck. So I was trying to negotiate a new deal for Tito and trying to get Chuck in the UFC. And, I started talking to the guy, Bob Meyerowitz, who was the former owner, about pay-per-view. And one day he just snapped on me and said, there is no pay-per-view. There's nothing. This thing, he flips out about how the business is doing so badly. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. I hung up the phone, and I called the Fertitta brothers, and I go, the UFC's in trouble, man. These guys are going under. I think we should buy it. I think we can get it from this guy. And Lorenzo put in a call to Bob Meyerowitz. A month later, we bought the UFC for $2 million.
And I believe, what year was that? What year was that?
That was January of 2001.
And when did the IMG deal go through?
That was 2016, like August of 2016.
What was the number on that deal?
4.025 billion. No, million.
4.025 billion. Billion. So I was talking to Lorenzo earlier today, and generally that's considered probably the most successful sports business deal in the history of sports.
Ever. Yeah, ever.
And
they talk about what some of these teams are valued at, but they've never sold for anything like that. Like the Yankees and the Cowboys and some soccer teams in Europe, but no. Even when the Clippers went, the Clippers went for $2 billion, which everybody was blown away by that number that the Clippers would sell for $2 billion, and we sold for $4.025 billion.
So something that a lot of us, sports folks in here talk about is, that obviously is a huge number. $4 billion is a lot of money. And I'm good friends, as you know, with some of the guys that paid for some of that money,
Yep.
and we don't talk too much about it, but everybody sort of quietly says, well, okay, that's a big nut, right? You've got to hit that number. How when you think about the growth opportunities and where the UFC can go and where that content can go, if I'm Ari Emanuel and I say, how are we going to get there? What are some of your answers?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, one of the things that we did right in the beginning, and I'd love to say that we were geniuses and we planned it that way, but the fact is nobody wanted the UFC. Nobody wanted it. Nobody was interested in it. And so when we would go in and cut a deal, Like, for instance, The Ultimate Fighter. For those of you that don't know, we have a reality show. It's one of the longest running reality shows on TV called The Ultimate Fighter. That was really what helped blow this thing up, because everybody was afraid to put, real fights on TV, especially UFC fights. And so at the time, reality was really getting big. So we came up with a reality show where the fights would be taped before, and if anything scary happened, we could edit around it, which I was completely against. I think that one of the things that I fought hard on in the beginning is, remember the show Contender? The Contender was the richest show in the history of reality television. It had more sponsors and more money, but they edited the fights. You can't edit fights. Even if a fight sucks, let me determine as a fan whether the fight sucks or not. How do you get to determine that and only show me the best parts that you like as an editor and as an executive producer? So I fought hard against that. I said, we can't edit fights, right? How many times have you guys watched a fight where you thought it sucked but your buddy liked it? I kind of liked it. Or you thought this guy won but he thought the other guy won. It's what's fun about being a fight fan. You can literally argue with your friends about what's going to happen before the fight, what happened during the fight, and what happens after the fight. Fighting is all about fighting. We watch the fights and then we fight about the fights. We argue about it, who's going to win, who's going to lose, who's going to this. That's the fucking fun of being a fight fan, right? You took that from us. When you edited the fights, you took that away from the fight fans and you lost them all. That's where they fucked up. Anyway, I get crazy about this sometimes. Sorry, let me get back on track here. So I fought hard against the editing of the fights, and everything, went as planned, and it was a huge home run for us. What was the question?
How are you going to make that money back? You got to make all that money back.
Yeah, I got to stay on track here tonight. And I had like an energy drink upstairs too, which doesn't help. So so what happened was, in the beginning, that first season of The Ultimate Fighter, so at the time we were pitching all these different networks, and Spike TV had just gone over from like the Nashville network, I think it was, or something like that.